There are still a number of people that don't know about my father. I thought that I had built a layer of secrecy around my life, and certainly I was very conscious of who knew and who didn't know about my history. I was concerned about my professional reputation working as a lawyer. When Campbell contacted me, I was very surprised because I had never heard of him before.
I acquired her mobile phone number and I sent her a text first, which took me a while to think of a polite way to say it. When I finally got her on the phone, I said, look, I'm ringing about Lindsey Rose. Am I speaking to the right person? And she said, yes, you are.
Immediately, I felt my cover was blown.
Lindsey Rose left nothing to chance. A cold-blooded and brutal killer.
He was one of Australia's most wanted killers.
Rose has been given a life sentence for the killings.
Confessing to 5 murders.
Yes, I did it.
A secret of that magnitude, I can completely understand why Elisha didn't want to tell people, even those closest to her.
There was a part of me that also wanted to embrace the opportunity and to no longer be burdened by the secret. And I guess that was an opportunity that I'd been hoping would come around. Should we give some to your brother too? Because who likes strawberries just as much as you? There's a deep sense of shame at my father's actions. I feel a duty to atone for his sins. Whoa!
I did it.
You did it, that's right, well done.
Elisha has fostered 2 little boys now.
Mix it all up.
I really do think that Elisha is doing it for all the right reasons in terms of wanting to provide a better life for children in need.
Does it taste good?
And now knowing what she has obviously experienced with her father and the crimes he's committed, it does make a bit more sense to reconcile that she might have a need to do that.
Do you want to have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want one too. Yeah, you're hungry. My father's crimes were very violent. They were premeditated. Pop! You like that? And that in and of itself is very confronting. Whoa! Because he absolutely intended to do harm to these people.
I first got to know Lindsey at the Burwood Hotel in Sydney. I don't remember ever being introduced to him. We just were at the same pub, and over time I got to know him.
Do you ever play with Lindsey?
Yeah, I did actually a couple of times. Well, from my own personal experience, we never had a harsh word. We always shook hands, or he even gave me a hug and a kiss on the side of the cheek. That's the sort of man he was.
Normally we had at least 3 or 4 games until I blew it.
He was a bit of a standout. He was outgoing and confident. Because I was only 19, he was to me like the popular boy in school. All we knew of him was he told us he was involved in a brothel at Campbelltown, and I'm not sure I even believed it at first. It was so far outside my experience, it just seemed like pub talk.
I didn't know about his criminal career at all. Once we saw his mugshot on the TV news, it made me question everything.
I just wanted to understand. So I wrote to him, and then I started visiting him in prison.
Hi, I'm here to see Lindsey Rose.
And I knew right from the start that this was a story that could make a book.
My parents met when they were working for the New South Wales Ambulance Service. My mum was a telephone operator and my father was an ambulance officer.
We met on the phone and then he came into headquarters one day and he came and sought me out and, asked me out. He was cheeky and he was bold and he was very honest and very open. Lindsey was just different. There was a lot of fire. Not too many flat points.
He was a paramedic, and the highlight, I suppose you could say, was he was in the second ambulance to arrive at the Granville train disaster. In January 1977, the Blue Mountains train clipped a bridge at Granville and it caused the bridge to fall on top of the train. There was more than 80 people killed.
He was an absolute hero. I mean, he lay on the ground and held the hand of somebody who died there when they released them, and that caused him a great amount of grief. Lindsey ended up resigning from the ambulance service.
He had a back injury and he felt he was bullied by his superiors. They didn't believe that he had an injury, so he ended up applying for a job with a private investigation business.
And then Christmas 1982, Elisha was conceived. And he was pretty excited about it, the thought of being a father.
There's a part of me that will never be able to reconcile what he has done. The man that I knew, the man that raised me, was not this mass murderer. Yet he is that person too, and he is both good and bad.
He held her first when she was born. He was a loving dad. He loved his daughter. We'd had Elisha's first Christmas with my family. Nothing outstanding, just normal lives, just doing what we were doing. And apparently there was more going on in the background than I ever knew about.
Because he was working as a private investigator, there was a bit of a blurry line. So he would go and do a legitimate private inquiry, then he might do a under-the-counter private investigator job where he was using some illegal means to get some information for a client.
From my experience as a police officer of 35 years, as a detective, working on these murders was one of the very pinnacles of my career, without a doubt. But at the time when they were all investigated, Lindsey was never mentioned, he was never interviewed, he was never a suspect.
And 1984 is when he committed his first two murders.
Bill Kavanagh was running a transport company and he had an altercation with a friend of Lindsey's that became violent. And Lindsey's attitude to that was, well, I'll get back at you.
Carmelita Lee was a young lady who was cohabiting with Bill Kavanagh at the time. When Bill arrived home, Lindsey shot both of them. He didn't want to have a witness left behind. Lindsey planned the murder, carried out the murder, and went back home to his wife and daughter. Elisha was 3 months old then.
I never even knew it took place. There were no triggers, there was nothing that said to me, your husband's just shot two people.
Lindsey's name never came up for the Bill Kavanagh, Carmelita Lee murders. He was 2 places removed from anyone associated with the investigation.
Lindsey is a very intelligent man. With his skill set as a private inquiry agent, you do pick up on surveillance, anti-surveillance, what police particularly would be looking at?
I had noticed that he'd changed quite a lot. He'd disappear. He'd disappear for days, weeks on end, and then would feel quite angry if I'd ask him where he's been. I never thought at any time that Lindsey would hurt Elisha. She was the sunshine of his life. But he had a fiery red-headed temper. Mind you, I had a temper too. And there was a lot of boy stuff going on that I wasn't ever a party to, and I tried to find out what was going on, and I was told to piss off and mind my own business.
Lindsey told me the marriage did have its tensions, and they were on again and off again for a while, and the marriage ended badly with Lindsey assaulting Linda.
I think I might have been holding Elisha. I was screaming at him, and that's when he punched me. And he knocked me out, and I hit my head on the wall, and I was unconscious on the ground. And he picked up Elisha, and he made sure, apparently, that Elisha was all right. And then, you know, back to his AMBO days, very kindly put me in the recovery position. Terrified me. I didn't want to have anything to do with him after that.
The next victim was Renette Holford. She was murdered 3 years later, 1987. Lindsey was allegedly breaking into a unit of a multi-millionaire, and he was disturbed by Renette.
So Lindsey attacked her with a screwdriver to make his escape.
And he just stabbed her continually. She was stabbed over 30 times, and she was left.
Elisha would have been 4 years old when that robbery murder happened. And again, that was something that I didn't know about until some years later.
The relationship I had with my dad, I guess like a lot of children of divorced parents, is I would see my dad on the weekends. It would always be lots of fun. It was never that mundane minutiae of parenthood.
His visits to Elisha were random. They were supposed to be every Sunday, but he wouldn't turn up as often as he should.
He treated me like an adult, and I guess no one else treated me like that. So we would sit in a cafe and have breakfast, and he'd read the newspaper and he'd hand me the comics, and he always treated me very respectfully as a person that had an opinion, and he never shouted at me, he never smacked me, he would always reason with me.
I used to ask Lindsey for a contact number when Elisha would stay with him for the weekend, and he was very cagey about telling me any information like that. So his whole personality changed from the guy I knew to very secretive and strutty and just cocky.
Lindsey explained where he compartmentalised frightening or difficult things in his life. And I guess it's something that allowed him to go about these violent criminal acts and then be able to go back to a normal family life straight afterwards.
We moved to Perth when I was 9 years old. My mum had repartnered and was soon to be remarried.
I had a normal life. I went to work, Peter went to work, Elisha went to school, and things were pretty normal, right up until a phone call.
The last murders that Lindsey committed that we were able to prove were on Valentine's Day 1994 at a business at Gladesville.
One of the victims was discovered near the office. She'd been stabbed, her throat slashed.
The owner, Kerry Pang, and a young girl, Fatima Ozenol, who worked for her, were both murdered.
He'd had a business dispute with Kerry Pang.
And there was a very vicious fight between her and Lindsey, and Lindsey only got the better of her when he actually shot her through the eye.
Kerry Pang had 5 sons, and I'm one of the 5. I was around 5 or 6 when she passed. I remember 2 men in suits come into the house the morning after, and those 2 men explaining to us boys that Mum is never coming back again. And I didn't quite understand it. It took a while for it to sink in and to get the point across that Mum has gone away and is not coming back again. My family explained it to me initially, what had happened, and it was easier not to talk about it than it was to talk about it. So we didn't talk about it a lot.
So Lindsey had committed 5 murders by now, and he'd probably be free today, except for the fact that he'd told this friend of his, a corrupt policeman, some of what he'd done.
The first time I heard of Lindsey Rose was when I was the senior investigator in Strike Force Yandy, looking at police corruption in the drug trade. That was 2 years after the Valentine's Day murders of '94.
When that corrupt policeman was himself arrested and charged with some of his corrupt activities, he decided that he'd tell the police about what Lindsey had told him to try and save his own skin.
When we get information like we got against Lindsey, very affable guy, likeable, when you get information like that, you can't dismiss it.
I had a phone call from a detective in Sydney asking me a whole bunch of questions. And they flew over to Western Australia.
I was 13 years old at the time. And I remember walking up the street and seeing Mum's car in the driveway, which was really unusual because she would not be due home for another couple of hours. I walked in through the kitchen door and Mum was sitting around a table with 2 police officers with all of the old photo albums out on the table.
I was interviewed formally and I was told punctuated bits of information, nothing direct, nothing all that informative.
I remember sitting and watching the late night news show, sitting on my knees in my nightie.
Police want to question 42-year-old Rose over the killing of 2 women inside a massage parlour at West Ryde 3 years ago. He's also
I knew I wasn't being told everything, but I didn't know that it was murder, and that certainly changed everything yet again. I never felt the police had got it wrong, so maybe my gut knew.
I believe that Lindsey Rose is somewhere within Australia. We consider him a very dangerous person.
At that time, he was one of the most wanted men in this nation.
And I called my girlfriend into the room and we were just flabbergasted. We couldn't believe it.
He was able to escape New South Wales and went to live in Adelaide. A guy that was employing Lindsey saw the photograph, and we were very fortunate that the very next morning, as he turned up for work, we were able to arrest him.
Inspector Baker and I were making inquiries into the murders of an Edward Kavanagh and Carmelita Lee at Hoxton Park on or about the 20th of January 1984. Is there anything you can tell me about that?
Yes, I did it.
Okay. What do you mean? Can you tell me what you mean by that?
I went to the house there and shot him.
All right.
There seemed to be no sorrow about it or no remorse about it. It was just they were there and this is what I did.
If I remember correctly, I hit him there.
And just describe that for me, where you mean there.
Well, in the middle of the forehead.
Okay, and what happened when you shot him?
He hit the deck.
He was just an absolute clinical psychopath. No empathy, knows what he's doing and is quite willing to do it no matter what.
I was gutted. I was terrified that I'd been so naive about what had happened that I'd never known. The realisation of what had happened sent me into a real dark place.
Detectives say it was Rose's confession that finally cracked the case.
Mate, it's good to hear. I just hope he gets a proper sentence for it.
Are you happy that he pleaded guilty? I mean, did you think...
Oh, what pleading guilty is nothing. It's not going to bring back my mother.
didn't know what to think, like my mother had been murdered, and I struggled with it mentally a lot, and I'm sure my brothers did too. It defined us characteristically and personally and mentally, really changed us all.
Rose, who's 43, will stay behind bars until he dies.
I was trying to process what was going on, and I had the police firing stuff at me. I could see that my mum was really upset. It was a horrific burden. It still is a horrific burden to carry. But particularly then, when I really struggled to comprehend my father's actions. I went to visit him in Long Bay Jail. I think I was 14 at the time. He had a white jumpsuit on that they would put on him backwards and cable tie the back of the suit so that I couldn't pass him any contraband. Hello, sweetheart. I received your letter and also the photos which went via reception. I have them on a notice board in my slot. And I remember, as he always did, he would just say to me, "Hello, sweetheart, it's good to see you." And it was like nothing had happened. I always hoped that later you and I could have got together and caught up on lost time. There was always that unspoken tension about what he had done and his actions. And he would always tell me, "When you're older, Elisha, I'll tell you, you won't understand now. I'll tell you when you're older, Elisha." I think it was my second and third year of university, and I was beginning to really struggle with who my father was. I was worried that I would be exposed by someone at university because as a law student we had access to cases and materials.
I first met Elisha when we were 19. At that time she was very busy with her studies. She was still doing her degree. I always knew that she had her mum and she had a stepdad, Peter, but she never said anything about her biological dad.
I was also able to research. I was able to find some court judgments and read descriptions of what he'd done. If I stopped to think about what my father had done, it was quite consuming. So I decided to get counselling so that I could rationalise in my mind what he had done and what that made me.
I think it was about 5 years we had known each other before she opened up about Lindsey. Trying to understand why she'd kept it was a big thing. She didn't want to be different from everybody else in such a big way.
Yes, he was my father, and yes, I had his blood running through my veins, and he was this person, but I wasn't my father, and that I had an opportunity to do and be whoever I wanted, and that I could do good things, and I didn't have to live in his shadow anymore.
I remember at Elisha's graduation, and I was whooping, you know, I was so excited. It was a huge achievement. I thought for her to come from a place of such dreadful things that had gone on in the past, she just was going to prove herself. She was going to put all that behind her. And she had this terrific career in law.
It was April 2009, the last time that I visited my father in the Goulburn Supermax.
Lindsey had always said he'd explain to Elisha when she was older why he did these things, how he came to be this way. He started off talking about how he had a difficult mother and a difficult childhood, and there were beatings and bullying, and he felt it was his role in life to stand up to bullies.
I don't believe that that excuses his actions or in any way makes it acceptable. My father's actions have been incredibly traumatic, that he has murdered 5 people and created horrific trauma and loss and grief to their families, and that will be intergenerational trauma for those families. At this stage, I have no intentions of visiting him again. It wasn't until March 2016 that I found out that the book would actually be published.
She sent to me an email once. She said, I just keep going back from being totally fine with it to just asking that I be dead in the book, that I be written out as someone who died. And in the end, she decided to live and be the lawyer from Perth.
So how long all up did it take you to write the book?
Oh, it's 10 years.
I could finally be honest and truthful with everyone around me. I didn't need to remember who I told and who I hadn't told. I didn't need to filter my conversations. I could finally be myself.
She may feel guilty that that's my father and that's what he did, and now I have to do something to fix it or make it right. What her father done, obviously she had no control of. She would have been young as well.
Hello there.
Hi, I'm here to see Stefan Lund.
If you wouldn't mind taking a seat, I'll let Stefan know that you're here.
Thank you. I'd got to a point in my life and my career where I had made something of myself. I'd survived, and at that point I realised that perhaps there was another way I could give back to the community, which was by helping kids that had similar backgrounds to mine. Look at the baby lion cuddled up tight. Very, very quietly, and say, night, night.
The application process to become a foster carer is intrusive, and so it was through that process that Elisha had revealed about her father. I guess some people might say, well, wouldn't that rule someone out of fostering to have had that experience in their life? Well, not at all. It's about the person they've become now that we're looking at.
Hello, baby elephant. Oh, I missed this one. This baby elephant is having fun.
There was one particular boy she was having every second weekend, and then was asked if she would take him on full time. And that was a big decision. But she'd already fallen in love with him from having him every other weekend. And then obviously she was asked to take on another sibling.
You like that, don't you? You've always liked that.
When the baby arrived home and I put him in his brother's lap, and he looked down and he kissed him on the head and he said, I love him. And that's amazing, that someone that's experienced such trauma and hardship and things that no child ever should experience can still have that capacity to love.
Every time I look into her piercing blue eyes, I see her father. But elements of him in there, no. She's too wholesome.
I think that as a human being, you have this capacity to love and to find good from bad, and to make decisions in your life that end up giving you good results and a wonderful life.